Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm chatting with Colin Joudrie from Selkirk Copper. Folks, this is a really interesting story in my view because we have quite the asset package that was purchased through bankruptcy proceedings that is now listed on the TSX venture, which means equity investors get a chance for a restart. The company has a former operating mill. They have a large land package and resource that includes copper, gold, and silver. And folks, when I sat down with Colin, I was super interested to hear what the game plan is moving forward and what Colin's going to get right that the previous operators couldn't. He also tells me about the partnership with the Selkirk First Nation and what his strategy is for the next year. All right, everybody, enjoy the interview. Colin, thanks for joining us today.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here.
So it's been a volatile year for commodities in general. Copper in particular has seen a number of problems globally, as I'm sure you're well aware. What's your current outlook for the metal?
It's an interesting question. I think where I sort of sit, this might be the best place we've been in a long time in the copper space, and partly because of those problems. This is not just a macro problem, it's also a micro opportunity. The disruptions that we've seen in the production and supply chain from several of the big producers has really exacerbated sort of supply globally, but it's also sort of sent a shockwave through the industry about where metal's coming from. And that just supports this broader sort of price increase. So when big mines like El Teniente or Grasberg go down, that sends a real shockwave through the entire market, and people are sort of scrambling to replace that supply. And then on the flip side, on the demand side, you've also got a great sort of long-term fundamental here that's been working for the last few years, which is electrification and just the broader demand for copper. So that per capita increase that we talk about, the use of the metal, just gets higher and higher as we go. So it's kind of a bit of a perfect storm that's been developing probably over the last decade.
Do you think that copper it's a really large market, and obviously our audience are junior mining equity investors, and there's nothing they love more than when we get these big price spikes and it creates a whole bunch of volume into the junior equities. Copper seems to be a little bit different though. It's generally an industrial metal, and it's a really, really large market.
Yeah.
Do you think it has the ability to sort of go on that sort of kind of bullish sort of, we'll say, massive up phase that we've seen in some of the other metals, or do you think that the copper markets are just naturally it's going to be sort of a slower ride upwards to the right in a bull
Yeah,
scenario?
it's a good question. I don't know exactly which metal you might be comparing to, but probably everyone's comparing it to gold right now. If you look over the last number of years, $5 copper or 5.10 today, that's an incredibly good price. And it's, not just 5 years ago or 6 years ago, you would have seen that price in the sort of 250 to $3 range. So it's significantly increased. My interest is more just about it sustaining itself. This is a great incentive price for copper. Anyone that can develop or is currently in production right now with these prices is making a lot of money. So I think it's a really good marketplace to be in. I don't think it changes a heck of a lot right now, just because the supply demand is probably closer to balance right now. My expectation is that these prices will be around for a while. So it's a very good place to be, particularly if you can see copper production coming, which we can.
So, Colin, I'm pretty excited to have you on because I love these sorts of projects where something that was once a producer had some issues. I'm a big believer that if you want to play in the capital market space, whether you're an investor, you're a deal guy, you're a corporate development guy, whatever it might be, you're going to make the most amount of money solving problems. Now, when I look at a project like what you have, that looks like exactly what you guys are attempting to accomplish here. Give us the high level overview of Selkirk Copper.
My view is Selkirk is a value play on copper. And when I say that, it's because of this recent history that they've gone through. We're essentially positioned to take advantage of a bankruptcy. So we've been fortunate in that. The prior operators not so much, but we are positioned to essentially acquire a very significant amount of both capital that's been invested in the ground and ready facilities that really just now need to be engineered and planned through to bring copper back into production. That bankruptcy has cleared all of the sort of former encumbrances and liabilities on the property. So we have a clean sheet to work from. So that's both very beneficial from a financial perspective. This will be the first time at this asset that we, the operator, will actually own all of the gold, the copper, and silver in the ore. And I'll just dive a little bit deeper on that. That gold and silver was previously streamed. So it was going to the streamer as opposed to the owner and the operator. Our go forward plan is different. We will own the exposure to the gold and silver as well as all the copper. That's a great benefit. And then the second part is any monies that we're investing right now, we don't have to build roads or power plants or facilities, et cetera. That's already there. And we've essentially got that at bankruptcy sort of sale prices. We can invest our dollars in the important things like developing mine plans, defining more resources, good high grade copper resources, and bring those into a coherent development plan. And we're not in a rush. We've got a couple years here to work through this, but then go straight back into production and be producing that sort of highly valued copper, gold, silver concentrate that the market needs. So it's a really interesting value story.
So let's get into the backstory a little bit. My understanding is that this property was first discovered back in the early 1970s. Then it ended up in the hands of a company called Capstone Copper in 2005, where it went all the way to 2019. Then ended up with a company called Minto Metals from 2019 to 2023.
That's right.
Then went into financial hardship. Uh, Basically, the Yukon government took ownership over it, and then that brings us to Selkirk Copper today. What's the backstory?
Well, you've captured a lot of it. It was a successful startup in 2007 by Sherwood, which was then Capstone, the company that you named. And it operated pretty successfully for a number of years. And then it became a bit of a second or a third tier sort of asset within the Capstone group. They still managed it well, et cetera, but it wasn't the core focus of their interest. So they stopped exploring on the asset. And when you do that on resources like this, you just run out of room. So it then went into care and maintenance and closure in 2019. A new group came in and bought it. And unfortunately, they restarted a bit too quickly. They were underfinanced and they just didn't have the plan in place to really execute well. So they sort of ran out of money. Um, what's the more important backstory, though, is that the Selkirk First Nation has been there the entire time. And the Selkirk First Nation, as it went into bankruptcy, they sort of made a very brave and very entrepreneurial decision that said, we're going to take this asset that we've been, receiving some benefits from over the past number of years, but we're going to acquire it out of bankruptcy and try to form a company and advance this ourselves. And that's where we sort of came into the picture. And the story really now is alignment between the First Nation, who will be a significant shareholder in the asset, but also want responsible and sustainable development, which is what we want. And they're going to be working with us to move forward to help permit the next stage of this mine life and see it forward. It's a really exciting story. Be the first majority Indigenous owned mining company in Canada.
And I also love these stories too that Frank Juster gets involved with, because I was saying this pre-interview, but if you were in a position like he is, you have a ton of mining expertise. I know he's got a lot of really smart people behind him, like my friend Rob McLeod, and you have this ability to go and find these assets, and he did this with West Red Lake. I think that that asset was previously operated by Pure Gold, where somebody goes and they spend all of this money building a mill,
Yeah.
drilling, getting it ready, and then the markets turn on them. They take on too much debt, and then they ultimately uh, can't can't breathe under the conditions. And then all of a sudden, it's like the equity investors have this opportunity to go and do this reset, and it really makes it attractive if you can get in at that sort of early stage.
Yeah, and that goes to this sort of value opportunity. It's also how you get at it. It's great that you mentioned Rob McLeod. Rob McLeod and another fellow, part of the Fiore group, a guy by the name of Ryan Westmark, when this asset went into receivership, instead of them positioning themselves to say, oh, hey, how could we go and acquire the asset at a low cost? They said, how can we actually help this First Nation? How can we reach out to this First Nation and help them through a very difficult period where one of their sort of engines of economics or economic engines for the First Nation was now being mothballed or moribund? how could we help them through this next phase? Because as you know, bankruptcies are super complicated. People are impacted. It's not a good place. So that outreach and that sort of entrepreneurial outreach by Rob and Ryan really created the foundations for what we're doing here now. And that's the sort of Fiore backdrop and the Juicer sort of backdrop is just thoughtful thinking about when and where, how to deploy capital, and then get the right teams together so that you can actually go make it work.
What sort of a resource estimate is there on the project right now?
Right now, we've got indicated and inferred resources just on a combined basis. And I know I'm not supposed to do that,
Yeah.
but it's about 35 million tons at around 1 to 1.5% copper, about a half a gram ton gold, and about 4 grams per ton silver. So all combined, we've just got just shy of 900 million pounds of copper in the ground, about 500,000 ounces of gold, and about 2.8 million ounces of silver.
Do you have any sense of how much drilling went into it to prove out this resource?
Yeah, so this is part of the really interesting part of this story. There really was almost no drilling from 2013 to 2019. And then the previous operator, one thing that they did very well is they actually drilled for the first time. So they drilled about 82,000 meters between 2022 and 2023 when it shut down. They were never in a position to update that mineral resource. We've done that. We issued an updated mineral resource estimate technical report in August of this year, which showed a 48% increase in contained metal from the previous estimates. So it's a really robust place to be. But maybe even more importantly, and I'm a geologist in early in my career and still always a geologist, is the exploration upside. In that drilling, they also identified lots of high quality exploration targets on the property that were never previously known. So there's a real exploration play here as well as just converting the existing resources into updated mine plans. So it's a twofold sort of story.
Yeah, I always kind of love when, as an investor, I can kind of look at that and go, okay, how much drilling went into this? And I know there's gonna be people who are cringing hearing me say this at home, but how much drilling went into it, and what would the replacement cost of the mill be? Because it's like that way I can kind of look at a balance sheet and say, okay, this is something that I can attribute some sort of value to. Obviously, we care more about the path ahead of us than the
Yeah.
path behind us, but if we were to start from scratch and wanted to blaze that trail, that would probably cost us, I assume, over $100 million.
Oh, it's well in excess of that. The plant itself is about $320 million invested in plant and facilities over time. That recent round of drilling is probably on the range of about $35 million, maybe 40. So it's a great platform. Think of it as a springboard to move forward. Not just the exploration drilling, but the optimism that it brings us, so that our drilling efforts can also sort of double down and increase on those resources as well as define new targets in the area. So we've got a current plan of about 50,000 meters as an initial drill program. We've already started that. We've got 4 drills turning on the property. We're about 12,500 meters into that already. And we're expecting results probably here in the next 2 to 3 weeks, which is just building more momentum around the story.
So, Colin, if I got friends who are watching this and they're on the buy side that run funds, and I have a few, they're always chatting about risk, and I think that the big question that they're all going to have for you is, how do you guys avoid the same fate of the previous operators?
It's a question that I've faced over the last several months as we've gone through this financing round from every single investor, and it's a really good question. So I think there's two things that I would say. Learn from the past, learn what the previous operators actually did poorly or maybe not as well as they would like. And one of that is they were in a rush. They rushed back into production and they didn't have a full plan as to how to make sure that they had enough ore going through the mill. So essentially they were running at about 50% capacity of the mill, and they just couldn't really make ends meet in the end. So that rush back into production is something that we're not doing. We're taking time to put together coherent plans, not just for the mining, but also for the permitting and importantly, water management. So we've got ourselves about an 18, 24-month period before we pull the restart decision. And that's one part. But the second part, and this is core to me as an individual. So I'm a big fan of boots on the ground. It's really important for assets like this that are a little bit unloved and unappreciated that we go to the asset and we make decisions at the asset, not in Vancouver or in Toronto or New York or somewhere. We have to do that as well. We've got to work with the shareholders, et cetera. But it's really important that these decisions, we understand what the asset needs, we understand those decisions on the ground. And that's what our team's doing. They're already all over this asset. Just in the last 6 or 7 weeks, I've been there now 6 times. And in top of that, I've also met with the First Nation and council several times as well. It's a real full on effort to just make sure we're doing the right thing for the asset.
All right, so Colin, last question for you. If I am watching this as somebody who says, okay, this is an interesting story, but I kind of want to see how management executes before I decide I want to hop in. If you and I were chatting this time next year and it was a successful year, what will you have accomplished when we sit down?
So a year from now, what we'll have is we'll have a fully updated mineral resource estimate. So it'll be another version of that resource estimate. We'll have updated mine plans. There'll be both open pit and underground mine plans. And ideally, we'll have a preliminary economic assessment that'll be completed that will inform that investment decision. So ideally, by October next year, and this is a commitment we've made to our First Nation partners, we'll have much more information and clarity about the direction that this thing goes. And they've framed it as a restart decision. And I think that's what we'll have. We might not make the restart decision in November of next year, but we'll be well on our way.
Well, Colin, I think you've got one of the stories that I think we're going to be following closely, definitely over the near term, as we see how the market responds to this company. But I think you've got a phenomenal project here. And I think that it's something that our audience is certainly going to want to keep an eye on. So thanks so much for taking the time to do this. And let's sit down and do this again soon.
Yeah, well, look, I very much appreciate the interest in the story. And maybe one thing I'll leave you with is the partnership opportunity here with the Selkirk First Nation is exceptional. It opens up a whole new area for exploration, but more importantly, it's the right thing to do. Developing these assets for the benefit of the communities that we work in is great, and they deserve a lot of credit for getting us to where we are.
All right. Well, thanks for chatting today, Colin.
No, thank you very much.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this interview, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching.